when we are online. We will be online in less than 1 minute, then you can start. Then, okay, because we are broadcasting online. Okay, go ahead. We are online.
Okay, good morning. Thank you so much, Queen Nadia. Thank you, Successworld. I am honored to be here. I had shared with the group on WhatsApp a little bit of what I did on YouTube last week. Sorry, let me just turn my music off. I was doing a little meditating, trying to prepare for you guys this morning. So let me turn that down. And so I had done a brief introduction. I had shared with Queen Nadia, this is a field I've been in for a little over 30 years now, and have sat down numerous times to try to put together content and curriculum, write a book, but you know, life gets in the way. And so I feel as though I'm being brought to a place now where it's time to share with you all some of my knowledge and some of my experience. So I will be bringing in some of my research work, some of my studies, as well as anecdotal stories of my life in the Hawaiian rainforest. I was in the rainforest for close to 20 years. I studied and worked with the kahuna. So I learned traditional ao apa'au, which is Hawaiian herbal medicines. I also worked with them with lomi lomi, ho'oponopono, and some of the energetic work. Prior to that, I worked with my Hanai mom, who adopted me, who was a Navajo medicine woman, also acupuncturist and herbalist. And prior to that, with my grandmother, who was also a massage therapist and an herbalist. So I don't want to talk too much about myself. I want to get into the content, but I did share with the group on WhatsApp last week a really small little YouTube. I tried to get into the introduction and discuss with the group a little bit about holistic theory. And I had described it as holistic, meaning whole, H-O-L-E, whole is in the whole being, and was trying to define that. So I'm going to go ahead and try to go through up until that point, in case anyone had missed that information. Of course, it's not going to be the same. I'm going off of a rough outline here. And again, trying to narrow down a lot of thoughts and a lot of information into as concise as possible to share with you what I feel will be beneficial. And so what I was describing last week is the necessity of understanding perspective and holistic in how we perceive the world and what our worldview is and how we interpret that and use that in our lives. So everything in our world is based on our filter of our mind and how we interpret that and how that has shaped us through language, through experience. Everything that we take in, we have to associate with something that is familiar in the world and how we perceive that. So our science, our medicine, everything that we have is based on our paradigm or our worldview. And I was describing a little bit of that history in that YouTube. So I will try to give you a little bit of an overview and then bring us back to that point. So when we're talking about holistic, we're talking about the body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit, and as being all one being. And so when we're talking about healing and we're talking about healing the self, healing the planet, healing others, we really need to look beyond the material self or the just physical self. That perception of the physical self limits our worldview, limits the way that we are able to look at healing and the way that we look at the world outside of ourselves. So when we talk about body, we are talking about the current model of the world, which is a mechanistic model of the world, mechanistic meaning machine-like, a machine in function. And this paradigm is a Western a Western viewpoint of the world that is really the basis of our current science. Although science is starting to shift because we're learning more and more about the unseen world with our instruments of measurement. However, when a lot of modern medicine came into play, this mechanistic, machine-like idea of the body set the premise, the thesis, and the idea of how we need to look at the world, look at the body, so that the research that has been done with this idea in mind. And I talked about in my YouTube video that this idea really did come from the philosopher Descartes in the 1600s. And he separated mind from body. And that was at a time during the Industrial Revolution. So the idea of machines and how machines work really set the tone and the paradigm for how we view the world. I talked a little bit about our history in the West and this idea of Platonic ideas, Greek philosopher Plato, in that he separated soul from body. And prior to that, even in Greek thought, that this idea that the soul was this interconnected essence with everything in the world. And we still see that today in Eastern thought. So ancient Greek, prior to Plato, did take into account a lot of this unseen world and that it was all interconnected, as in Taoism. Taoism being a type of Chinese thought and thinking where the Tao is an energetic force that flows through all things. And this concept basically created the structure of, say, Chinese medicine when we're thinking about the yin and the yang, or the male and the female. And the entire idea behind Chinese medicine is to bring these energies into balance. And we can see this in Ayurvedic medicine as well. There's this idea of these energetic forces. So we have the different doshas, the different body types. We have Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and I will talk a little bit about that. So I'm kind of shifting into this idea of the East. But what I'm trying to bring into your thinking process is that it wasn't so distinctly different between West and East prior to this shift in mindset that really stemmed from ancient Greek philosophy and then into modern philosophy. As we create these ideas about the world, we build our world according to our ideas. We can construct our world to fit into these ideas, and we create our science. We test our theories, and our theories have been developed from these premises that were originally based on philosophy. Philosophy is the original thinking that creates the thesis. Science in the Western world, but the scientific method that all modern science is based on is trying to test these theories and these ideas. And so science will test and retest and have other individuals test and retest these theories to try to have proof. And this proof being empirical, meaning things that we see, things that we observe, things that we touch, okay? And so when we think about that, I'm getting ahead of myself. When we think about that, we have to understand that we are only setting out to prove that with which we believe to be in existence based on observed data and information. So there's an entire universe of information that science does not necessarily take into consideration, as there's no way to measure or test much of the unseen, or until we are able to test the unseen. So as our instruments of science get more advanced, we are able to then see the unseen and observe that information. And examples of this would be like the microscope, right? So we're able to, the subatomic level, the telescope, beyond, right, what our eyes are able to observe. And we get into the unseen worlds, which then shifts and changes our ideas. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background on that. I think that last week when I talked, I brought that into the idea of mind, so that our mind and our thoughts, when we take into consideration all of these things that we bring in, are skewed by our perspective, and that perspective has been inherited by us and passed on to us through our culture, through our culture's worldview, through our cultural perception. And so that the true art of science is to extend out and beyond that, to test that, and to be able to think beyond the boundaries of that. Okay, so that is basically how all of our knowledge comes from, these ideas of our nature of reality. And so I was talking about the separation with the West and the East, and how rigid science has become in the West. It seems as though it is somewhat shifting as out of necessity, when we get into the idea of quantum physics, when we get into the idea of these new discoveries that are sort of shaking the structure that we have accepted as being our reality. It's bringing into question everything that maybe we have believed thus far. Any questions so far? I think I was kind of going into I'm trying to set a framework for this. Does anyone have any questions thus far?
No question, but you are just amazing. We are just listening and learning. You are just amazing.
I appreciate that so much. I have my you're making me blush, Queen Nadia. I have my notes here. I have my outline, and then I have this, that I had tried this outline that is now turning into a book. So I hope I can follow this class up with a book. So Eastern thought, Ayurveda specifically, I do want to get into Ayurveda and this idea of energies and the Tao. The history of modern medicine. Okay, so it wasn't very long ago. I can even remember in my lifetime, not to date myself, but I do remember as a child that herbs and natural medicines were still being used by Western doctors. That they would say, have a bowl of warm soup, take a little bit of aspirin, sleep, have rest, call me in the morning. These sort of home remedies that moms or grandmas would use, these teas, right? So I don't have the dates here, excuse me, but I will state that modern medicine is a current monopoly, and it's profit-based. In the West, it's profit-based. A lot of this came about, and I want to say maybe the 1800s, 1900s, I will have to, 1900s, yeah, mid 1900s, early 1900s, I'll have to look for an exact date on that. I do want to bring in John D. Rockefeller, the Rockefeller Association. So petroleum products coming in, so it would have to be in the early 1900s with the use of petroleum products and creating petroleum and oil. There were a lot of byproducts when you create petroleum products. When you create gasoline, right, you have these byproducts, these petroleum byproducts. So at this time, the cosmetics industry and the pharmaceutical industries were monopolized. And a lot of these byproducts, these petroleum byproducts, were being recycled in the pharmaceutical companies and in the cosmetic industries. So, of course, it's profit-based, right? At that time, the herbal doctors, the herbal medicine, all of these things that had been passed on for hundreds of thousands of years, usually oral tradition or from mother to daughter, you know, often the women who were at home with the children, the midwives, would nurse family members, would help birth the children, and would pass this on through their families. And it was not all just women, right? There were a lot of male doctors who were also herbal medicine doctors. The Barefoot Doctors, the doctors that would go to the houses of, I would say, you know, it was more agricultural. Civilization was definitely more agricultural. You had your city centers, but especially when I think about the United States and the Western world, there were extended families living in an agricultural-based society at the time of the Industrial Revolution, when things shifted to the cities and people left their homes to go work in the cities to bring money back to the families in these agricultural settings. And so you had the Barefoot Doctors that would do house calls, that would go in and check on families. And then you had the mothers and the grandmothers and the aunts that knew these herbs, would grow the herbs, would make the teas. So when medicine became industrialized, when it became profit-based, when pharmaceutical companies became more chemical, when they started to employ these petroleum products, these byproducts of the petroleum industry into products, it became another industry, and herbalism became illegal. It became quackery, snake oil salesman. I mean, you hear these terms. And so this was sort of a what is the word I'm looking for? I will find the word. It was taking away the credibility of these herbal natural practitioners and slowly monopolizing this industry of medicine, this industry of pharmaceuticals. And so it became a standard practice in medical schools for this very rigid scientific method to go through this indoctrination educational process, to limit the practice to purely pharmaceutical based. So we even lost the connection between food and health, diet and health. This was all lost over time because it became purely scientific chemical in nature, being profit-based. Many of the chemicals that are in pharma are derivatives of plant medicine. Okay, they are a concentrated active ingredient of plant medicine. They take out the chemical that they decide is beneficial or has the action on whatever aspect of healing or repair they are attempting to create, I guess. They are attempting to heal. Concentrated chemicals can be toxic for the body. Petroleum products are very toxic for the body. And then we have side effects, right? So now we see a lot of these giant lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies, against doctors. Not that doctors are doing anything intentionally to do harm. The Hippocratic oath that all doctors take is first do no harm. That is supposed to be this oath that doctors take. However, they are in this place where the schools have been set to such a level that they are jumping through hoops and going through motions and doing what they are required to do to pass their exams, to be in alignment and in accordance with, for us in the United States, the American Medical Association. They can be disbarred, they can lose their licensure if they practice outside of that prescribed methodology, which is a monopoly, which again is profit-based. So now you have the basic structure. And that doesn't mean that doctors that are practicing don't see flaws within the system. And that doesn't mean that there is not some part of pharmaceutical, or there are some pharmaceuticals that can be highly beneficial for certain conditions. So I don't want to discredit all of it across the board because it has its place. Surgeons definitely have their place. There are times when these emergency interventions are very necessary. So I would never want to discredit, but what I'm trying to give you is the foundation of why we have the system in place that we have, and why maybe doctors are not able to do a lot of research in other methodologies. One, that they just don't really have the time. Two, practicing physicians oftentimes are so concerned with liability because of lawsuits that they want to follow practice according to guidelines specifically so that they don't put themselves at risk for lawsuit. Three, they are instructed by pharmaceutical representatives who get the information from the pharmaceutical companies to sell the medicines that are for profit and will prescribe the medicines based on the diagnostic tools that they are using, looking for the particular ailments, and then prescribe according to what the pharmaceutical representatives have stated. So it's this very huge conglomerate of monopolized companies and special interest groups that support these companies, and they're traded on the public markets. You can buy shares in pharmaceutical companies, right? So when you talk about science, when you talk about research, it absolutely can be biased and skewed based on, one, your premise, and two, based on groups that might be funding that research. So we will develop our premises based on what we're looking for. And oftentimes when we set out to look for something, or we have an idea of how we think something will happen, we end up proving it. We can prove it because we are aware of things that are in alignment with that, and data that can support that thesis. And sometimes we don't see the things that can negate that. That's not in all cases. I did speak of double-blind placebo studies, right? And so in medicine, the standard, the gold standard, is a double-blind study, a placebo study, a double-blind placebo effect study, trying to remove the placebo effect. And when I spoke of placebo, I like to bring in placebo, meaning mind effect. Mind. The mind is affecting our health and well-being. So what that means is oftentimes in studies, what we see is if we believe it's going to work, it works. And it has nothing to do with the chemicals that we're putting in our body. And yet, what's interesting is that medicine will say, well, we need to remove this effect in order to know that it's purely the medication or the pharmaceutical or the chemical that is working. So we're going to remove this placebo effect. And I would like to ask why we aren't investigating the placebo effect deeper. Why are we removing it? It's working. And so if that is working, and that means that mind itself is working, and that we have diminished the power of our minds to such a place where we want to just say that it's this thing that happens when we think that it's going to work, it works, but that's not what's actually working. What's actually working is this chemical. So again, when we're talking, yes, Nadia?
Yes, Dr. Corey, I have a question. I have two questions for you.
Yes.
You have explained beautifully this problem with chemicals and all that. So my first question, how we can get out from this system of chemicals for our health. And my second question is, you spoke about the mind, and if we believe in something, it will work. This is true. But for that, you need, for example, your mind, if he believes in the medicine will work on it. But one thing, if you are not really spiritual, and you don't really believe, your belief are not strong enough, or your faith not strong enough. Even if you say that this product, if I take this product, it will not affect me, it will not make my body toxic and all that, because all these chemicals are toxic. So even if you think that it will not put you down and the won't have side effects, but at the minute you take them, you have this side effect. They are by themselves strong enough to put you down, believe or not.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so let me think on that. So yes, I will be getting into more how we can incorporate natural healing into our lifestyle. Yes, side effects are cumulative in nature. These chemicals are cumulative in nature. I have, anecdotally speaking, there are cases, if we talk about certain cases of individuals who live wretched lifestyles, smoking, drinking, living late into life, doing things that are not necessarily healthy, and they have a very positive mindset. So I'm not necessarily condoning these things, these medications, and that you may or may not have side effects. Not everyone has side effects necessarily every time. Certain people are more prone to reactions than other people. And so I have to think on that a little bit more deeply. When I speak of mind and I speak of placebo, I'm speaking of the power of the mind, and that the mind is such a powerful effect that it is given the name placebo as being a variable that skews scientific research. So it is such a strong factor in scientific study that they have to test taking into account that variable. So my thinking is that placebo or that mind effect is so powerful that in and of itself is healing in nature. And then when we are talking,
sorry
what was
to
that?
interrupt you
Yeah.
because you are saying something very interesting. Do you think that people can take even poison and it will not affect them if they have this strong mind? Do you believe in that?
I mean, belief, my herb teacher used to take very, very small amounts of poisons, which would almost be a homeopathic concept, small amounts of poison ivy, poison oak, to develop an immunity to it that works in a holistic way. I am not sure. I cannot answer that 100%. I would not advise it. I would not advise trying it.
Maybe I can help you.
Huh?
I said, allow me maybe to help you to answer to this question.
I'm not going to advise that. I believe it is possible to get into such a state that we can maintain ourselves physiologically in such a way, perhaps. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I wouldn't try it. Again, I know herb teachers that do it.
I can assure you that you have some people in the world, they are so strong enough. Their faith is indestructible. Their faith is so powerful that yes, they can be bitten by a snake.
Correct.
Or take any poison.
Yes.
It will never affect them because their faith is so strong. And I believe in the power of the mind. That
absolutely.
I believe also that we don't need all these chemical or anything. You know, I believe that the humanity, we made a big progress in science and in also this medicine and all that. But I believe that we still have the lack of knowledge of every plant and every herbal that we can use by ourselves, and they will give the same effect. And you
absolutely and better effect, and because no side effect.
You are created at the image of the nature. So by using it, you are more than healthy. And yes, but how to get out from this system of chemical industry? How? Because they are very powerful.
So let me speak a little bit on, you bring up faith, and you asked about if you were not spiritual, if you do not have spiritual belief. So even let's take it into say neuroscience, for example. I don't need to necessarily have faith to know that the mind itself cannot distinguish between images in the mind and the world outside. So that being said, I'm finishing with hypnosis. I work with hypnosis, imagery. As we go through these processes of imagining, our body creates those same neurotransmitters and chemicals as though it were really happening. So I don't want to go too into science, and you did bring up faith. So I do want to get into soul and spirit as well. But scientifically speaking, the mind, so for example, PTSD, which is a traumatic stress response and an anxiety disorder. Now research finds that fibromyalgia, which is chronic pain, and PTSD are pretty much linked together. So this prolonged state of stress and adrenaline release and the cortisol levels, which are the stress hormones, actually create these memory patterns of pain in the body. So this chronic pain is a direct result of this mental stress. So you don't need to have faith necessarily to know that the mind is so powerful that it can affect the physiology of the body. It's just that science is very slow to catch up because of this system of checks and balances with this empirical evidence. So it has to be tested and retested so much in order for it to be considered valid in the scientific community that it lags behind, and it lags behind philosophy. So trying to understand that philosophy sets the mindset and the ideas, and then science sets out to prove these ideas. And yet science and the scientific method is based solely and completely on empirical evidence and data, and testing and retesting that evidence and data. So in order for it to be scientifically valid, it has to be tested and proven, which takes an entire branch of thought and puts it into a separate category as being not scientifically validated or non-scientific in nature. And because of the way the monopolies have been in business, corporate capitalism, for a very long time, there's so much money, billions of dollars were made in this COVID. I'm not even supposed to say the word COVID, it's like this sacred cow, but billions of dollars have been made by these pharmaceutical companies that are publicly traded companies. Billions and billions of dollars have been made from the vaccines, from the masks, from all of these things that happened with this pandemic. Not that it didn't affect people, not that people weren't ill. I want to get into that concept. So to answer your question, Nadia, it really is, and this is why I had sort of tried to set this framework. It has to do with our overarching perception of the world and the current dominant paradigm of Western thinking that dominates globally. Western doctors are so well respected. They are this elite class that people aspire to be. And I have very many friends who are disheartened doctors because they can't practice the way they want, because their hands are tied because of the American Medical Association. These institutions that won't allow them to practice outside what is considered to be validated by science and the ascribed course of action. Kemba, you had a question? No, I saw a hand raised. Did someone have a question?
Yes, Kemba wanted to say something. Kemba? Okay, maybe we'll come back to him later.
Okay. Okay, so that's not to discredit any of the studying that doctors have done, any of the work that they've done. There's miraculous things happening in medicine. Was that Kemba?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have nothing to say.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw your hand. Okay, thank you. So that's not to discredit everything, and I don't want to put it all as black and white, right? It's not. There's this, I don't even want to say spectrum, but a continuum. There's very good things that modern medicine has done as well, right? Increasing our sanitation, some of our public health measures, clean water. I mean, so the bubonic plague, the plague that wiped out most of Europe. Later, really, so much of that had to do with sanitation. We have much better sanitation practices, keeping things very clean. We understand about food handling. So how do we change it? We have to shift mindset, and that's that is my work. That's the work that I'm doing, is to try to shift concept and mindset. And yet we have these institutions that begin indoctrinating people at a very, very, very young age. So shaping the mind to fall into the current paradigm is also part of our educational system. And it's prolific, it's ubiquitous. It's very hard to escape. Some people will call it the matrix, right? You hear people refer to the matrix, and I'm not saying that with necessarily a negative connotation, but it's limiting. So it's a perspective. It's not necessarily the perspective, and it has its place. It definitely has its place. The modern world, the industrialized world, I would say that industrialized medicine can serve for industrialized mishaps. For example, a car accident, that is going to be an industrial effect, right? Having a car accident and going through traumatic injury and being rushed to an ER where they are equipped to be able to deal with such a catastrophic impact in a very industrialized and mechanistic way. So they will put bones back together mechanically. This is where this medicine is brilliant. So I don't want to diminish the brilliance of that, because it is necessary for certain things. But when we talk about the body and our own mechanisms, our systems in our body, it's beyond just a mechanistic model. It's beyond just the parts that we are, the organs and the skin and the bone. We break this down into these parts, and then we have these medical specialists that may or may not be communicating with other specialists that are so focused and hyper-focused on one aspect that they miss the whole being. So they send you out to the psychologist, and they send you to the, internist, and they send you to the OBGYN, and not knowing that, say, all of these parts are completely intertwined in a system that functions beautifully, harmoniously, like an orchestra, right? And it's all being directed in this beautiful symphony. And so if we pull it apart, we're missing the interconnected nature. That being said, so the body is integrated with the mind, is integrated with the soul, is integrated with the spirit. And the soul being our essence of being, our internal energetic essence of being. You could think of it, if you want to put it into scientific terms, our electromagnetic energy, if you want. If you think about acupuncture and Ayurveda, if you think about needling or marma points, it's working on actually the electromagnetic system of the body, our electrical being, our magnetic energy. The earth has its magnetic energy, right? The Schumann resonance is the earth's magnetic resonance. That energetic principle, that soul, that, if you want to put it into scientific terms. So when Western modern scientists look at acupuncture, they will find that it's not connected to the nervous system, that the meridians that go through the body in Chinese medicine are where energy flows, but it doesn't follow the pattern of the nervous system. It's a different energy system that the ancient Chinese discovered, where they use the needling techniques to move that energy. That's the electromagnetic energy. So I don't want to underplay energy, but energy is unseen. And now it's being seen, right? Because we have instruments that science can measure. Okay, so again, always when thinking science, understanding that science is limited by the instruments that it has available to gather empirical data, because science is data-driven and data-based. So it will always be limited by the theories and the instruments. And it doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong. It means that that practice of science has a framework that it is required to ascribe to in order to be considered science and scientifically valid. So I don't want to downplay the benefits of science. I love science, and philosophy is where you question science. Yes, Nadia.
Yes, please, Dr. Corey, can you please speak more about this energy that that the Chinese discover, and if you know how they discover it, will be just amazing to know.
Okay, as far as how they discovered, I'm not 100% certain. I know that in Ayurveda medicine, so going over to India, Ayurveda being the mother of medicine, so of course, China was very influenced by India. You know, the Buddha actually came from India, right? So into China, into East Asia, right? That there was meditation, that they meditated deeply on the internal world. So while the West was looking externally, the East was looking internally. Through their meditation, in Ayurveda, they speak of soma. There's been some question as to what soma is. Some people say that it's like mushrooms. Some people say that maybe it was some sort of hallucinogenic drug. They speak of soma in the Vedas, but basically the saints in the Himalayas were meditating on the internal world. And so they found these systems. And I am not certain, but I do know that Ayurveda has the Marma points, which follow energetic pathways in the body that are similar to the meridians. Also, if you think about Ayurveda and Vedic medicine, you think about the chakras, which are energy centers in the body. You have the basic chakras. There's numbers of chakras, but you have the root chakra, the first, second, third, the psoas, the heart, the throat, the third eye, the crown, and then into the universe where you can bring in cosmic energy. But as far as in Chinese medicine, the meridians, the energy is the qi. So qi energy is similar to pranic energy in Ayurveda, is similar to ki in Japanese idea. In Hawaiian, it would be ha. Prana and ha have to do with breath and breathing, taking in this energetic or the breath of life. We hear the idea of the breath of life. So a lot of these practices were to really strengthen this vital life force energy. Derek, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
I think I just want to talk about it. Yeah, I think I just want to hear from you about the area where you're talking about energy. So like when we talk about the biochemistry, how does the energy affect any part of the biochemistry? Or maybe just to hear from you, how can you just describe energy in few words as in line to our daily life? How does it affect us? How do we use it like in such a way?
How do we use energy? Is that the question?
Yes, and how does it affect our biochemistry in terms of decision making, like it comes to thinking, and as well as our dependence? How does it connect?
I have to think about that. I would, in our physiology, I would equate, so that it's complex. So if I talk about qi in the body, from a Chinese perspective, if we're talking about meridians and qi, we can have energy that's free flowing in the body so that our meridians are being well nourished, that energy is what enlivens the organs and the organ systems of the body, that's life force energy, that is what gives life. So that's nourishing. When we talk about stagnant energy in Chinese medicine, we're talking about stagnant energy. When there's accumulation of stagnant energy, meaning it's energy that's not moving, it's stuck energy. This is what creates illness in Chinese thought. Okay, so in Chinese thought, that illness is related to stagnant energy or qi. There are certain practices that people can do, like Tai Chi or Qigong, which are practices that generate more of this energy and keep this energy flowing. So that the key to health from this perspective is to keep building this energy and keep this energy moving and free flowing. If you're speaking in Ayurveda, this stagnant energy or blocked energy would be considered to be like dross. Dross, it's a heavy, dark energy. It's hard to describe. It's something that you see with like your third eye, like if you're meditating, if you're envisioning, if you're looking into somebody, if you're scanning a body, you can see where there's these blockages. So if we're talking in Western medicine terms, if we think about energy, if we think about frequency of energy, and if we're thinking about molecular structure, and we think about this vibration and the different frequencies at which these molecules vibrate, there's more rapid vibrational energy, and then there's a more a slower vibration of the molecular structure. When we think about the material world, we're talking about molecules that are vibrating at a less rapid frequency. I don't have like the exact, numbers or measurements of those frequencies. However, slower moving molecules create more solid materials. And just like when we think about water, right? We have water, liquid water. If we slow those molecules down, we have solid water, we have ice. If we warm the water, the molecules start to move more rapidly, yes? And if we heat the water to a boil, the molecules move so rapidly that it becomes a vapor and it becomes a steam. It's all still water. It's just water vapor, liquid water, solid water. And it has to do with how rapidly those molecules are moving. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yes, it really does. It does. Okay, but I wanted to understand it in a science perspective, because when we talk about the law of conservation of energy, it says that energy cannot be made or destroyed, but it can move from one form to another. So
Correct.
I was kind of confused, and I want to talk about life in form of energy, like thoughts and emotions. And since energy cannot be made or destroyed, so like how do
Correct.
we come up with our thoughts made, our feelings made in line with the stagnant energy that we've talked about?
It's actually, so I don't even know if it's a technical term, but if you're speaking esoterically, it's called transmuting energy. You're not destroying energy, you're shifting energy. So in the same way that solid ice becomes steam with a higher frequency, a higher vibration, you're shifting it, you're moving it. So it's not that you would be destroying the stagnant energy, you're moving it, you're breaking it up and shifting it so that it is able to move, if that makes sense. So if you're sensing this stagnant chi, you're shifting and moving it so that it vibrates at a different frequency. And no, it's not destroyed, it's shifted. Does that make sense? So I like to think of emotions. So when we think about emotions in the body, that is really an experience of energy. Those emotions carry with them vibrational frequency. So sadness and despair being a very slow moving frequency, joy being a very fast moving energy, right? These emotions relate to health and well-being. That's sort of how we can experience energy in the body. If that makes sense, you hear low energy, high energy.
That's
what was that?
I love it when you say you talked about. I love it from the point where you've talked about shifting energy. I think that's everything that I can get from now.
Yeah, so there's a lot of practices to do this, you know, in the ancient East. And I'm thinking that you're from Africa, so I know that you have a lot of different practices as well. And I'm not as familiar. I did dance some West African dance, and I'm familiar with some of the ancient gods and goddesses in West Africa and the medicinal practices, traditionally speaking, not in the modern hospitals in that sense, but that the dance and the movement, that these things are all practices that move this energy, that shift this energy, that you even see this concept in the West where they say like this laughing, you know, these doctors, these like clown doctors that bring in laughter and how laughter is healing. It's a lighter energy and it's a lighter emotion. And so there's so much wisdom in these traditional practices that are found all over the world, right? In all continents, there are found these ancient traditional practices that were really very, very wise. And it's very sad that this has been taken out of our modern experience as opposed to somehow integrated. But I do feel that some of these things are mutually exclusive. Like there is no place between the two where you can have both exist, because they kind of negate each other. So I think what it means is that our current paradigm would need to let go of a lot of its ideas, would need to accept that there may be some premises that were incorrect, and that is getting into ego, and that is getting into losing money. And that, I mean, I think I would put that on the same level of oil companies recognizing that we need to shift to a different form of energy because it's non-sustainable long-term for the environment. That's a lot of money that you'd have to let go of a lot of things. A lot of people would lose a lot. And so I think that, also getting back to Nadia's question, it's going to have to take people really letting go and accepting that maybe some of the things that we have decided are real for us, we have to let go. Sort of like for Copernicus, you know, that like, oh, the world isn't flat. We're going to have to accept that maybe everything that we've believed up to this point has to be put into question. A lot of people don't want to do that. Nadia?
Yes, Dr. Corey, I want to ask you one question, because we're an expert in plants and energy and nature and all that. And sometimes, yes, we have some frequencies, very low frequency, because we are not feeling good. Or do you think that there is some plants, for example, that have that are vibrating at a very high frequency, that can, when you take them, it will change completely your vibration. You
Yeah.
go higher in higher frequency.
Yes. So that is
From for example, from depression, you are going to
correct.
a big joy and happiness.
Correct. So that is the practice of herbal medicine, and because this is supposed to be, you know, a 10-week course, I'm trying to map it out for that amount of time so that I can have that content. But yes, so that is the practice of herbal medicine from an Eastern perspective. And so the plants, depending on the energy in which you're looking, depending on the body type. So there's no, so this is the problem that happens, I think, a lot with modern medicine, is that there's one cure for one ailment. And that's not the way that herbal medicine traditionally works. Herbal medicine works with looking at the different energies and the different body types and the different energetics of the plants. So the plants carry with them a vibration and an energy about them. And that is also why, even in the modern world, when they're trying to process these herbs and sell them in the same way that pharmaceutical companies are selling these herbs, they're diminishing their potency because they are taking them apart and looking for the active chemical ingredient and concentrating it. So now all we have really is pharmacy and more pharmacy. The plants themselves come in from the place in nature where they're carrying with it that vibrational frequency of that surrounding biosphere, all of that energy and that vibration is in that plant. And so when we consume that entire plant, we're also taking in that essence. We're not taking a hard pill that's been concentrated. That's not herbal medicine. That is pharmaceutical medicine. That might be plant medicine, plant-based medicine, but that's still concentrated extracts of plants. And so herbalists go about it in a very different way, where we are doing extractions, but using the whole plant, not taking the concentrate. And then you have flower remedies, you have homeopathics. There's a number of different methods for consuming those plants. And I'll get into food, and I'll get into herbs, and I'll get into the medicine aspect and actual remedies in the following courses. But we're going into about 10 after. So I'm going to have to wrap it up for today. But are there any questions or comments before I leave? No?
I believe that we are done with, we gave you so many questions today.
It's good. I promise I will elaborate on all of those questions in the coming weeks. It's a lot of information, but
I just want to ask you one last question.
yes.
Why holistic? Why to use this term of holistic?
Well, holistic means the whole body, mind, soul, and spirit. And so all of those factors play on our wellness because we are not just body. And so the distinction was made with holistic because in allopathic medicine, which is our current medical, predominant medical practice, all that's looked at is the body and the biology. But we are so much more than our biology, right? And not only is it our biology, but whole also being an extension outside of ourselves. Let's even think of our biosphere, of our surrounding environment, that we're all interconnected, that it's all interconnected. So that if the earth is sick, we are sick. We are an aspect of the earth itself, right? So we could get into the Gaia theory and the Gaia model. So what I'm attempting to do is create a bridge and a crossover between these principles of science and this understanding of science and the Eastern thought and Western thought and ancient ideas with modern ideas. And so it's a big topic. And it's 30 years of work. So I hope to give you guys all of that. Yes, because anything less than holistic is only part of it. It's only a small component. It's only one dimension of a multifaceted, multi-dimensional reality that we're living in on this planet.
I love you.
I love you too.
Mahalo,
Thank you for
Niloa.
having me. I hope that blessed you all with some information and some thought. And so hopefully next week I can try to put together a little bit of handout and some information. And as I get into the remedies and things like that, I will try to, it's 11:11 a.m. my time. What a perfect time to quit. 11:11 is a magical
Yes,
number.
It
So I'm
is
going to stop.
Just amazing. I want to say in Hawaiian, mahalo niloa.
Mahalo, aloha.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Dr. Corey.
Thank
And
you.
you are just amazing. I enjoyed this course, and all our people also watching us online, and people who are with us today. You have we have India, Morocco, Zambia.
Nice. I feel so
We have
honored.
you.
I feel
We
so
have you.
honored. And if I speak of your culture, please, I hope I hold it in the highest esteem. I was born in the West, lived in Hawaii, had a lot of Eastern influence, but yeah, I feel honored to be able to
And
share.
we love our Hawaiian teacher. We love you very much, and we are learning from you a lot.
Mahalo.
Mahalo to you. To all our people who are listening to us and watching us online, want to say that with Dr. Corey, it's every Monday at 5 p.m. France time, 10 a.m. USA. So
Central USA time, yes,
yes.
10 a.m.
And thank you very much. And so we meet next week, next professor, next platform. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you for being here with us. Bye.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye.
Hello.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, aloha. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.